In this video, I want to talk about argument standard form. So the first place to start is defining what argument standard form is. So argument standard form is a specific type of presentation of arguments. And it works as follows. You look at a passage of text or an argument that someone puts forward in speech, and you label and identify each of the premises of their argument. You also will label and identify the conclusion of the argument, and then you'll take it all and vertically arrange it, listing each of the premises and finishing with the conclusion. So if someone gives you an argument, you would start by identifying all of the premises, and you would write P1 and then their first premise, P2, then their second premise, P3 and their third premise. And then once you got to the conclusion, you would write C and then write out their conclusion. And you would vertically arrange this starting with premise 1, premise 2, and then conclusion. Now that we have our definition of argument standard form, well, let's look at some examples. So in order to put an argument into standard form, we actually need an argument to work with. So here is one. Logic and Philosophy is the best philosophy YouTube channel out there. Videos are uploaded every week. The host or creator of Logic and Philosophy responds to comments, and the videos themselves are very informative. So here we have an argument, and now let's put it into argument standard form. So we do this by identifying the premises of this particular argument. So premise 1 might be the channel uploads every week. Premise 2 is that the videos are informative, and then premise 3 is that the creator of this particular channel responds to comments. And then finally, we finish with the conclusion, which is that Logic and Philosophy is the best YouTube channel out there. So what we've done here is taken a list of sentences, identified each one of the premises and the conclusion, and vertically arranged all that information. Let's look at another example of putting an argument into standard form. So here's an argument. Jo Jorgensen should be the next US president. Jo Jorgensen is the only candidate with a PhD. Jo Jorgensen is the only candidate that's going to lower the US debt, and Jo Jorgensen is better than the main alternatives. So we'd start by identifying the premises. Premise 1, Jo Jorgensen is the only candidate with a PhD. Premise 2, Jo Jorgensen is the only candidate that will lower US debt. Premise 3, Jo Jorgensen is better than the main alternatives. And then conclusion, you should vote for Jo Jorgensen, or more explicitly, Jo Jorgensen should be the next US president. So finally, why would you ever want to put an argument into standard form? The first thing to note is that putting an argument into standard form doesn't confer any special status on that argument. It doesn't make the argument good or bad. It doesn't endorse or condone or deny the argument. It's simply a way of presenting an argument. The question then would be, what's the benefit of this particular type of presentation? I think some of the benefits are obvious. The first is that it makes explicit what the conclusion is, as well as what the premises are. When you're given a passage of text or you're listening to someone talk, you might not be clear what their conclusion is or what the reasons are for that conclusion. But once you take that information and put it into standard form, then you say, okay, this is your conclusion. You're saying it's supported by these particular premises. They can, of course, turn around and say, hey, that isn't my argument. My conclusion is actually this or that. But you have a way of pinning down what the premises and the conclusion are. The second reason you'd put an argument into standard form is it actually involves excluding any material that's not part of the argument. So if an individual started this Jo Jorgensen argument by saying, hey, have you heard about Jo Jorgensen? Oh, I was researching candidates yesterday and I found this one candidate named Jo Jorgensen. This would not be a part of the argument for Jo Jorgensen. Instead, it would involve a question. It would involve this kind of narrative as to how they came to their information concerning Jo Jorgensen. But none of that would be part of the argument for why you should elect or why Jo Jorgensen should be the next US president. The last benefit of putting an argument into standard form is both pedagogical and dialogical. Let's say someone dislikes an argument you put forward, but you don't know why they dislike it. They wail around and they're upset with it and they tell you it's a bad argument, but you don't know what they dislike about it. Well, once an argument is put into standard form, now you have a way of figuring out why they dislike it. You can say to them, well, there's only two main things that can go wrong with an argument. Either the premises are false or the conclusion doesn't follow from those premises. So what don't you like? Do you dislike premise 1, premise 2? Or are you saying that both of those premises can be true, but the conclusion might not follow from those premises? Once you've identified what they dislike about it, then you can have a more constructive debate rather than wailing your hands around and being upset with them as well.